In this video, I'm going to show you how to do some simple analyses in SPSS. Now, I already have some data popped in here, but I haven't explained what they are. Before I do, pause the video and enter these numbers into your own SPSS spreadsheet. Now, these two variables represent gender and height. Variable 1 represents people's gender information, and variable 2 represents people's height information. Now, instead of having to remember this, let's go into variable view right now and change the names of these variables. We'll call variable 1 gender, call variable 2 height. Now, the data for people's heights are in inches. So we're getting things kind of between 60 and 70 inches, which is about 5 to 6 feet. The data for people's genders aren't quite as clear. I'm not typing in male and female, even though I could, using a string variable, because male and female, those aren't numbers, and SPSS needs numbers to analyze. Instead, I'm using a coding scheme of 1s and 2s, where 1 represents female and 2 represents male. Now, this is an arbitrary code. I could use 0s and 1s, or 5s and 10s, or any two numbers at all. But 1s and 2s are simple, so I'm using those. Now, a quick mention on the scales of measurement. Gender is an excellent example of the use of a nominal scale, because the groups are qualitatively and not quantitatively different. So I can change my settings to reflect that. I'm going to go over to Measure and change it from Scale to Nominal. Height, on the other hand, is a quantitative variable with fixed interval differences between scores and a meaningful 0, so we can leave this variable as it is set to scale because it's ratio. Now, we're almost set to start analyzing different aspects of these numbers, but there's one last thing we can do. For gender, it can be a little bit confusing to remember, well, which one was male, which one was female, 1s and 2s, I can't quite remember. So we can assign value labels to those things. I go back to variable view, and under values, I can tell SPSS what each value means. So, if I type in that a value of 1 means female, it knows that 1s are female. Same thing for 2s and male. Pop those in there and hit OK. Now, if I go back to data view, I see all those 1s and 2s have been replaced by females and males. If I want to turn that off and see the numbers again, there's a little button up here on the toolbar called Value Labels. Just click that, they're back to numbers. Likewise, I can activate it or reactivate it under the View menu. Just check this box that says Value Labels, and they'll go back to the males and females. I think it's more useful to leave it on, so I'm just going to do that. Now, I think we're ready to analyze these data. So probably one of the more simple things you can do is just count up how often things occur. It seems easy to do by hand for this data set, but remember, if you're dealing with larger data sets, counting things up by hand can get a little tedious. So let's have SPSS do it for us. So up at the top, go to Analyze. Analyze in SPSS is going to be your very close friend. Probably the menu you use most often, and all the analysis options are in there. So under Descriptive Statistics, go to Frequencies. Here we can see how often or how frequent different things occur. So now this window pops up. You're going to see this type of window a lot in SPSS. Basically, all the different variables we have are on the left. And all the different variables we want to analyze go on to the right. So you can decide which variables you want to analyze just by highlighting them and then moving them over with this little arrow box. You can move them back if you decide you don't want them. You can also just kind of grab a hold of it and then drag it over, whatever you want to analyze. So to decide whatever you want to analyze, gender is probably the best for right now, and when you're ready, just click OK. Now your output window is going to pop up here. I was saying this in the last video, but one of the problems with SPSS is that it often gives you a lot more information than you want. So it's a bit of a trick looking for the relevant information. Also, the outputs aren't exactly pretty. So we need to kind of figure out what it's showing us here. And luckily, this is a pretty simple table. It's telling us, first off, this little table, the N, It's saying we have 10 valid scores, none are missing. Basically, we don't have any empty cells in there. This table is probably the more telling one. It's telling us on the left are different groups. We have female and male, and in this frequency column, how often they're occurring. So we have 6 females, we have 4 males, we have 10 males total. Now there's percents, which kind of just convert that to percentages, 60, 40, and 100%. Valid percent, if we had a few missing cases, it would divide it differently out of the total number of available cells instead of all cells. And then cumulative percent, which is saying 60% of the people are female and 100% are either female or male. You know, we really don't need those things. I think most of the relevant information is just frequency right there. So we could do the same thing for height. We could create another frequency table for height, but that would tell us how many people are 60 inches tall, how many people are 61 inches tall, how many are 62 inches tall, etc. That's probably not going to be very informative to us. I think a better way to convey the information, or to convey the gist of how tall people are, might be to calculate the average of their height. So let's try that. And just FYI, you could run analyses from the output window. The same menu is there. Just for simplicity or just for stability, I'm going to go back to the data view, the spreadsheet. Let's go to Analyze, and under Descriptive Stats, go to Descriptives. We get the same basic window again. All the variables we have on the left, all the variables we want to analyze on the right. Let's just pick height this time and move it over. And before we hit OK, I want to see what different options we have. So click on this button in the upper right. These are all the different types of descriptive stats it could calculate for us. Mean, standard deviation, minimum, and maximum. Those are pretty standard things. If we wanted, we could get the variance and the range and the standard error of the mean. The sum is good too. I'm going to click on sum. There are more options on here, like what type of distribution we're dealing with. Display order, if we had multiple variables we're analyzing at once, and actually we can analyze as many variables as we want at the same time, but we only have one we really want to do right now. We could specify here what order they appear in. I really just mostly leave this a variable list. So hit continue, and whenever you're ready, just click OK. The output's going to pop up slightly below our last table. So what we see here is our variable, height. How many scores are in that variable? We had 10. The minimum score is 61, so that's the shortest person in our group. 80 was the highest score. 692 inches. That would be how long everyone would be if we kind of stacked them up on top of each other. But I think this mean is the most important thing. So the average height for our 10 people is 69.2 inches, with a standard deviation of about 6.27 inches. So what we can do now is we can start to break down height across categories. We can compare heights of different people from different genders. So the easiest way to do that would be going to Analyze. Instead of Descriptive Stats, let's go to Compare Means and pick that first option, Means. Now here we need to specify basically what our dependent variable is and our independent variable. You know, we didn't really assign people to condition. Gender would be what's called a quasi-independent variable. Let's pretend it's the independent variable because we want to break down the different categories, the different groups. Well, that's gender. And the dependent list, the things we want to measure, do calculations on, that'd be height, the inches. So click that, and I think we should be good to go. We could see what's under options. A lot of stuff. We don't need that. When you're ready, just click OK. Now, once again, we're getting more than we really need from SPSS. This table, I don't really see what it's used for. This second table is, I think, the one we really want to see. This is where we see how tall females are compared to males. We have females, the average height about 68.3 inches, and there are 6 females contributing to that mean, standard deviation about 6.89. Males about 70.5 inches, 4 males going into that standard deviation about 5.91. So it's telling us that on average, males are a little bit taller than females. We also have the total, 69.2 inches. That's how tall people are on average, all 10 people, with a standard deviation of about 6.27. That's the same number we got up here from doing descriptive for all those people at once, 69.2. So overall, frequency counts and descriptive stats are a good way to take a peek at potential trends in your data, and SPSS made it extremely easy to do so.